The Sea Bell, or Frodo's Dream, by J R R Tolkien. I walked by the sea, and there came to me, as a starbeam on the wet sand, a white shell like a sea bell, trembling it lay in my wet hand. In my fingers shaken, I heard waken a ding within by a harbour bar, a boy swinging, a call ringing over endless seas, faint now and far. Then I saw a boat silently float on the night tide, empty and grey. "It is later than late! Why do we wait?" I leapt in and cried. "Bear me away!" It bore me away, wetted with spray, wrapped in a mist, wound in a sleep, to a forgotten strand in a strange land, in the twilight beyond the deep. I heard a sea bell swing in the swell, dinging, dinging, and the breakers roar, on the hidden teeth of a perilous reef, and at last I came to a long shore. White it glimmered, and the sea shimmered with star mirrors in a silver net. Cliffs of stone, pale as rule-bone, in the moon foam were gleaming wet. Glittering sand slid through my hand, dust of pearl and jewel grist, trumpets of opal, roses of coral, flutes of green and amethyst. But under cliff eaves there were glooming caves, weed-curtained, dark and grey. A cold air stirred in my hair, and the light waned as I hurried away. Down from a hill ran a green rill, its water I drank to my heart's ease. Up its fountain stair to a country fair of ever eve I came, far from the seas. Climbing into meadows of fluttering shadows, flowers lay there like fallen stars, and on a blue pool, glassy and cool, like floating moons, the nenuphars. Alders were sleeping, and willows weeping, by a slow river of rippling weeds. Gladden swords guarded the fords, and green spears and arrow reeds. There was echo of song all the evening long, down in the valley, many a thing running to and fro, hares white as snow, voles out of holes, moths on the wing, with lantern eyes. In quiet surprise, brocks were staring out of barred doors. I heard dancing there, music in the air, feet going quick on the green floors. But wherever I came, it was ever the same. The feet fled, and all was still. Never a greeting, only the fleeting pipes, voices, horns on the hill. Of river leaves and the rush sheaves I made me a mantle of jewel green, a tall wand to hold, and a flag of gold. My eyes shone like the star sheen. With flowers crowned I stood on a mound, and shrill as a call at cockcrow. Why do none speak wherever I go? Here now I stand, king of this land, with gladden sword and reed mace. Answer my call, come forth all, speak to me words, show me a face. Black came a cloud as a night shroud, like a dark mole groping I went, to the ground falling, on my hands crawling, with eyes blind and my back bent. I crept to a wood, silent it stood in its dead leaves, bare were its boughs. There must I sit, wandering in wit, while owls snored in their hollow house. For a year and a day, there must I stay. Beetles were tapping in the rotten trees, spiders were weaving in the mould heaving, puffballs loomed about my knees. At last there came light in my long night, and I saw my hair hanging grey. Bent though I be, I must find the sea. I have lost myself, and I know not the way. But let me be gone! Then I stumbled on, like a hunting bat shadow was over me. In my ears dinned a withering wind, and with ragged briars I tried to cover me. My hands were torn, and my knees worn, and years were heavy upon my back, when the rain in my face took a salt taste, and I smelled the smell of sea-wrack. Birds came sailing, mewling, wailing. I heard voices in cold caves, seals barking and rocks snarling, and in spout holes the gulping of waves. Winter came fast. Into a mist I passed. To land's end my years I bore. Snow was in the air, ice in my hair. Darkness was lying on the last shore. There, still afloat, waited the boat, in the tide lifting, its prow tossing. Wearily I lay as it bore me away, the waves climbing, the seas crossing, passing old hulls clustered with gulls, and great ships laden with light, coming to haven dark as a raven, silent as snow deep in the night. Houses were shuttered, wind round them muttered, roads were empty. I sat by a door, and where drizzling rain poured down a drain, I cast away all that I bore. In my clutching hand some grains of sand, and a seashell silent and dead. Never will my ear that bell hear, never my feet that shore tread, never again, as in sad lane, in blind alley and in long street, ragged I walk, to myself I talk, for still they speak not, men that I meet. J R R Tolkien is perhaps the most well-known of Britain's war poets, and yet not considered a war poet due to the relative prominence of his academic and prose career. Tolkien fought in the First World War during the Battle of the Somme, where many of his closest friends were injured or killed. The Sea Bell, much later subtitled Frodo's Dream, hints at the strange alienation experienced by a soldier returning from war. The Lord of the Rings itself can be seen as a work deeply influenced by this experience. Frodo's journey in particular sees him physically wounded at Weathertop and permanently damaged by the feat of carrying the One Ring to Mount Doom. The more famous poet W. H. Auden, notable for Funeral Blues or Stop All the Clocks, was particularly impressed with The Sea Bell. In a 1967 letter, Auden told Tolkien that he considered The Sea Bell to be his finest poetic work and called it wonderful. Tolkien did not join the army when war broke out in 1914, but instead deferred enlisting until he had completed his degree in 1915. In a sign of the times, Tolkien's friends and relatives were shocked that he had not signed up to fight immediately. Writing to his son Michael many years later, he recalled, "In those days, chaps joined up or were scorned publicly. It was a nasty cleft to be in for a young man with too much imagination and little physical courage." Describing his posting to France with the Lancashire Fusiliers in June 1916, he wrote, "Junior officers were being killed off, a dozen a minute. Parting from my wife then, it was like a death." The story described in this poem is a peculiar journey indeed. The narrator picks up a white shell that he finds on the beach and is taken away to a strange land. There are signs of beauty and culture in this land, from gems and amethysts to echoes of song, but the land is predominantly cold, wet, and dark. Would it be a stretch to liken the dismal, wearying experience of this land to Tolkien's long years spent in Belgian trenches, enduring hunger, fatigue, and thirst until all sense of time is eroded away? Does this passage in particular not seem to describe those experiences of the First World War? "Black came a cloud as a night shroud, like a dark mole groping I went, to the ground falling, on my hands crawling, with eyes blind and my back bent. I crept to a wood, silent it stood, in its dead leaves, bare were its boughs." Immediately before this experience, he describes a sense of glory, casting himself as a king of the land, armed with wand and a golden flag, and with star-sheen eyes. Certainly this illusion seems to speak of the perception of martial glory that the British public held at that time, an expectation that was swiftly betrayed by the realities of trench warfare.